From a modest upbringing in the Syrian city of Homs to the heights of unimaginable power, this is the story of a boy who ascended the throne at just 14 years old and spiraled into one of the most bizarre and controversial reigns in Roman history. He wasn't just an emperor. He was a high priest, a scandalous innovator, and a figure so polarizing that even his grandmother plotted his downfall. Get ready to uncover the jaw-dropping tale of Elagabalus, a ruler who enforced the worship of a meteorite, scandalized Rome with rose-petal orgies, and turned the imperial court into a circus of chaos and extravagance. Stay tuned as we unravel the astonishing rise and outrageous fall of Rome's most infamous emperor. His name was Elagabalus, and his story will leave you speechless. He was born Sextus Varius Avitus Bassianus in 204 CE in the Syrian city of Homs. Before becoming an emperor, he was the high priest of the sun god Elagabal, which means God of the mountain, and from that, he earned the nickname Elagabalus. When Emperor Caracalla was assassinated while urinating by the Syrian roadside in 217 CE, the young Bassianus found himself at the center of a succession crisis. As the first cousin once removed of the late emperor, his claim to the throne was tenuous at best. But his ruthlessly ambitious grandmother, Julia Maesa, seeded a rumor that he was Caracalla's bastard son. Remarkably, the rumor worked. Convinced by his resemblance to the late Caracalla, the army swore allegiance to the young Bassianus and marched to meet the usurper Macrinus in battle at Antioch, in modern-day Turkey. Macrinus was captured and summarily executed, and in the spring of 218 CE, the 14-year-old Elagabalus was proclaimed emperor. As was tradition in ancient Rome, Bassianus adopted as his imperial name an amalgamation of the best emperors that went before him. Without waiting for the senatorial approval, he proclaimed himself Marcus Aurelius Antoninus Augustus, the same royal name as his predecessor Caracalla. But while Bassianus's name embodied the best of Rome's imperial legacy, his character embodied the worst. Elagabalus's first act upon arriving in Rome was not to attend the Senate or see to matters of state, but to construct a temple on the Palatine Hill in which to install his god. His god took the form of a black conical meteorite from the ancient city of Emesa, modern-day Homs, which was then duly placed in the temple, which Christians, Jews, and Samaritans were compelled for the worship of their gods. Every summer solstice, the emperor arranged for a procession for the divine rock, which must have seemed completely insane to even the most open-minded onlooker. A 6-horse chariot carried the divinity, the horses huge and flawlessly white, with expensive gold fittings and rich ornaments. No one held the reins, and no one rode in the chariot. The vehicle was escorted as if the god himself were the charioteer. Elagabalus ran backward in front of the chariot, facing the god and holding the horse's reins. He made the whole journey in this reverse fashion, looking up into the face of his god. And that's not all. During religious ceremonies, the emperor made Rome's senators watch he danced around the rock's altar to a cacophony of drums and cymbals. Elagabalus was said to have never slept with the same woman twice. His boundless libido extended to charioteers, whose speed and physical prowess he greatly admired. At that time, it was forbidden for the Roman emperor to engage in relationships with charioteers, making the act a significant scandal in Rome. But all in all, Elagabalus cared less and did what he felt was good for him. Elagabalus is said to have procured men for political office based solely on the size of their genitals. He introduced a totally bizarre gift-giving lottery. Elagabalus introduced the practice of giving chances, random objects in excessive quantities, which remained in fashion for hundreds of years. At his banquets, he would inscribe the gifts his guests were to receive on the spoons they ate with. Some would read 10 camels, 10 pounds of gold, or 10 ostriches. Those less lucky would come away with 10 pounds of lead, 10 hen eggs, or 10 flies. Nor was it only at his banquets that he would give away gifts. The emperor would donate dormice, bears, and even lettuces at the gladiatorial games he hosted. As well as this, Elagabalus would create chaos among crowds by throwing pieces of gold and silver into the crowd. He would allegedly throw fattened cattle, camels, and livestock, and even slaves. Elagabalus was famous for throwing rose-petal orgies. Elagabalus can be credited with inventing the Roman equivalent of a foam party. But this wasn't the kind of petal party you wanted to attend. Several revelers were apparently smothered beneath them as they found themselves unable to crawl out. Elagabalus engaged in a particularly cruel form of human sacrifice. Apparently, he would comb the country for beautiful young aristocratic men whose parents were still alive, because he considered the sorrow of both parents greater than that of one. These young men he would personally torture and disembowel, examining their vitals in the presence of magicians. His dress sense was absolutely wild. Much noise was made about how extravagantly Elagabalus dressed, and if even a fraction of it is true, he must have looked absolutely ridiculous, or fabulous, depending on your fashion sense. He wore tunics made entirely from gold or purple gold, gem-studded Persian dress, and a jewel-studded diadem and shoes. He would often appear in public dressed in the traditional robes of a Syrian priest. Hardly surprising, given that this was his occupation before he was emperor, and he is frequently described as wearing makeup and cross-dressing. Could Elagabalus have been transgender? Elagabalus offered doctors vast sums of money to create him a female genital by means of incision. Elagabalus's inglorious end. You know you've gone too far when even your grandmother wants you dead. But this was precisely the situation in which Elagabalus found himself in June 221 CE. Julia Maesa convinced the emperor to adopt his cousin, 12-year-old Severus Alexander, whom she wished to replace him. Alexander didn't have to do much to overtake Elagabalus in popularity. So hated was Elagabalus among the Senate and the soldiery that they'd have backed a donkey in a toga rather than suffer another moment under his rule. Fearful that his cousin would attempt to overthrow him, Elagabalus moved to have him killed, but not before contingency planning for his own assassination in almost comical micro-detail. Elagabalus entwined a scarlet and purple silk noose to hang himself with, if he had the time, and kept golden swords lying around the palace in case the situation called for a quick death. He prepared poisons mixed with precious stones in case he fancied a drink before he died, and even constructed a tower of gilded and jeweled boards in case he fancied throwing himself to his death. In the end, it was all for nothing. Elagabalus was slaughtered by his soldiers as he hid in the toilets. His corpse was dragged through the streets of Rome and thrown into the river Tiber, washing up in Rome's sewer, the Cloaca Maxima. One of the most inglorious Roman emperor deaths for one of Rome's most hated emperors.